Well, I'm Sarah Coakley. I'm a theologian, a philosopher of religion, and an Anglican and Episcopal priest. First and foremost a theologian. I became a priest in midlife. I've retired from the University of Cambridge, where I taught at the end of my career for 10 years. And I'm now living partly in America and partly in England in the summers and continuing to write my systematic theology.
So, Dr. Coakley, what do you like to do for fun or relaxation outside of theology?
Lots of things. Primarily things to do with music, I would say. That's my avocation. So I play various keyboard instruments and a clavichord, a harpsichord, and a piano. But I'm dissatisfied with my own competence in this area, and so even more I prefer to listen to other people playing music, including my two daughters who are much more accomplished than I am. And I always listen to music when I'm cooking or working in the kitchen. I think that's my number one. And number two, unsurprisingly, is reading. Reading a very wide range of literature, from poetry to novels to biographies to many dense books of theology, which aid me in whatever I happen to be about to write.
Lovely. Thank you. Can you tell us what is asceticism and how is it useful for our faith today?
Asceticism is a term for an approach to a way of life which is disciplined and ordered, usually according to some kind of rule of life. And there's been great criticisms of asceticism, particularly in the late 19th century from Nietzsche onwards, as being repressive and constraining. But the right forms of asceticism are always ones that lead to ultimate freedom rather than to destruction of parts of the self, even though there have been extreme forms of asceticism, to be sure, within the Christian tradition. And I think that since asceticism involves the kind of training and sorting of desires, it's peculiarly significant to our current culture of the commodification of desires, which we are bombarded with all the time, not least on the web. The question that presses really, especially on anyone who wants to lead a good life, is how is my life being ordered to the goals that I truly desire?
In what areas do you see our world and our church divided? And what is a message of hope that you may have to share?
You don't ask small questions. We're living in a world that is insistently now divided between increasingly intensified alternatives, and in which increasing both politically and ecclesiastically, and increasingly those alternatives seem at both ends of the spectrum to tend to reduce rationality and thought to power maneuvers. This is what I see as the main danger at the moment in American politics. And I'm not saying anything particularly novel here. We've lost a language that we can share across different opinions, across different religions and none, that we can regard as a lingua franca that can bring us to the table and allow us to have enough in common so as to be able to disagree interestingly and constructively. And I think in this context, actually, religions can be part of the answer and not part of the problem. Most people assume that religions, being at their most insistent and especially passionate, divide people rather than unite people. But religions also have the capacity to teach people how to stay, how to listen, how to pray, how to go deeper, how to not give up hope in conditions of apparently great hopelessness. So I think our main challenge at the moment is to not panic and to bring all the resources of our various religious commitments to a place where we go deeper rather than lighter, where we are able to develop through the Spirit's aid places of deep reflection and mutual listening, And I don't think we should give up on this task, and I think very small groups can make a huge amount of difference in a larger political context.
Any last words of wisdom or insight that you'd like to share?
Well, I would like to say that if I look around the world, and I move around the world quite a lot, when I'm looking at places of hope where young people do not feel powerless and do not feel oppressed and anxious about the future, it tends to be in places where really creative ecumenical engagement is happening. And this is interesting because the major churches have rather lost interest in ecumenism in the last generation. It was a great enthusiastic point during the time of the Second Vatican Council, for instance, and afterwards. But at the moment, not as much happening at the official levels between churches that shifts how we think of each other. But the Spirit moves in surprising ways, and where younger people particularly are mutually learning from each other across these boundaries are the places where I think regeneration and hope and truly deep thinking about the future without despair are occurring.